So my name is Samantha Vinci, and I'm talking today about Markov chains and how they can be used for natural language generation. So Markov chains are an amazing tool in general for simulating real-world systems and environments with computers. Google uses a Markov chain in PageRank to determine the order of their search results. They're used by meteorologists a lot, and they can be used for forecasting and economists, and they're just generally a great tool. So what are they specifically? That's the actual formula for Markov chains, and that's the only time we'll be seeing that in this talk, since there's a lot you could get into. It's a very in-depth, very technical topic, but this is just an overview. Okay, so the definition we're focusing on for today is this. Markov chains are a system that can transition between states using a random memoryless process. So what does that mean? Okay, let's look at an example. Say we have Jeff as a baby, and we have every moment of his life that we've had as our data, and the only things he's done so far are eat, sleep, and, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, play, sleep, and cry. In this example, those would be our states. Together with all other behaviors that he might have done, they form our state space. And if we made a Markov chain, it would look something like that. So you'll notice that even though we only have 3 states, we have 9 transitions. That's because a state can transition from one state, or it can transition back into itself. I can be doing a tech talk one moment, and then the next moment I'm still doing a tech talk. The way we would determine this kind of probability is, again, by looking at our past history and training data. There's a lot of different ways you can show this, and we can get more into matrices later, but just as an overview, this is the basic formula. If we want to figure out what the probability is that he'll go from sleeping to playing without crying, we can say sleeping is I, playing is J, and then this is the formula over there. Okay, let's give another example of how this works in more in depth. So if everyone knows the John Lennon song, Imagine, if we wanted to make a Markov chain that generates text, we might use these lyrics as our training data and say that each word in that set that we originally started with will become a state. So if we're looking at the first part of it, Imagine is followed at one point by the word theirs and by the word all. So there's a 0.5 probability that it would go to all, and a 0.5 probability that we would go to theirs if we're currently in that state. Whereas if we're looking at the word theirs, there's a pretty much certain chance that it's going to transition into no, since that's the only word that ever follows theirs. Okay, so why is this useful? So going back to that definition that we started with, Markov chains are useful because they are memoryless. If we're looking at predicting the weather and we had information about whether it was rainy or sunny for the last 50 days, we could say, okay, 50% of the time it was rainy and 50% of the time it's sunny, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's always a 50-50 chance that it will be rainy or sunny. If it's sunny, it's much more likely to continue to be sunny, and if it's rainy, it's much more likely to be rainy. So because of this memorylessness, Jeff is a good example, the weather is a good example, games of chance, the economy, most board games actually, and apparently basketball, but please don't ask me how that works, are good examples. A bad example will be anything where the dependency goes back further than the current state, like blackjack, or you'd assume language. So if I have the sentences, quickly she was running, and she was running quickly, the thing that and I wanted to generate new text, the thing that should follow quickly depends also on what words came before that. So if we have noun, adjective, noun, it would be very different than verb, adjective, verb. We can get around this by using something called an absorbing Markov chain, where each state absorbs the previous state, so we create one state that is never really left. This is a quick diagram of how that looks. And before we go, I just wanted to show you some fun uses of Markov chains to generate text. If anyone's ever been to Arrowhead Trip Reports, that's a site where people can rate their psychedelic drug trips. And one developer created a Markov chain and fed it text from Arrowhead Trip Reports and Tech Recruiter emails, and the results are funny. I also found this really great example by Anna Garcia, who used a Markov chain to create a site that will write music for you. And she used predetermined probabilities and just created an object or an array of objects. All right, so that's a basic overview of Markov chains, and hope you guys found it interesting and want to learn more.